Breaking a habit is never easy. Lord knows I've got a few. None of them are healthy. But thanks to our sponsor, Fume, I can now look at that problem in a different way. You see, not everything in a habit is actually wrong. So instead of making drastic, uncomfortable changes, why not just remove the bad from the habit? And Fume is an innovative, award-winning, flavored air device that does just that. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses delicious flavors. Because instead of encouraging bad habits, Fume is here to do good. Your Fume comes with an adjustable airflow dial and is designed with movable parts and magnets for fidgeting, giving your fingers a lot to do, which is helpful for de-stressing and anxiety while breaking your habit. There's orangey and citrusy flavors which are quite strong. You're getting that kick, you know? We all put off stopping something because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and fun. And Fume has served over 150,000 customers with so many success stories, and there's no reason that can't be you. So head to tryfume.co.uk and use the code TRUE, that's TRUE, all block capitals, at checkout for 10% off. But for now, enjoy the podcast.
He's a content king.
Yeah. Do you know the True Geordie?
You're going to decide that, are you?
What the fuck is wrong with it?
You know how they play.
I want a piece of that.
Today on the True Geordie podcast, I am joined by the truest. It's true. It's damn true. It's Kurt Angle, our Olympic hero. I'm so grateful to have him on the show. Thanks for coming on, mate.
Thanks for having me on, man.
I've just watched your documentary, and I can honestly say it might be the quickest I've ever cried watching a documentary because it's so emotional from the get-go, and it was fantastic to get a real personal side of the athlete. And were you like daunted by putting it out there, like everything the way you did?
It wasn't easy, having those emotions come back. And I will say this, the director, Alex Perry, did an incredible job. He brought the best out of me and the worst. And I thought that the documentary was really well done.
Yeah, it was one of the best documentaries I've ever seen in my life. As someone who watched you from, day one in the WWE, but didn't really fully understand what was in your previous life running up to that, it was quite mind-blowing. And I think one of the things that really hit me as a fight fan was, wow, what an athlete. I mean, you were a beast, unbelievable, a demon of a trainer. And I kind of wondered, what was your most natural gift, in your opinion, as an athlete?
My work ethic. I was a good athlete. I wasn't the best athlete, but I was a pretty good athlete. But it was the work ethic. It was finding a way to win. And my way to win was to get my opponents tired. So the harder I trained, the better well-conditioned I got, the better chance I had at getting those guys tired and beating them. So that was the whole idea in 1995 and 96 during the World Championships and the Olympic Games was to wear my opponents down. And it worked extremely well. I actually almost quit wrestling in 1994 for good because I couldn't beat these two wrestlers. They kept beating me. I couldn't make the world team. And I knew if I couldn't make the world team, I couldn't make the Olympic team. So I decided to quit, and I took about 5 months off. And every day it ate me alive. I kept thinking, what if I could have won? I'm never going to find out unless I see it through to the end, and I'm going to regret it if I don't try. So I came back, but I came back with a game plan. It was called exhaust training, and it's when you train till you're exhausted, and that's when the training actually begins. And it's almost a form of torture. I learned this from the University of Iowa head wrestling coach, Dan Gable. He taught his wrestlers this. And when I went through it out there, I realized I needed to up my game, that these guys are the way that I should be training.
And in terms of your cardio, what was the best workout for you to get to that point?
Well, you know what? It wasn't just a workout. I would condense a bunch of workouts into one. So when I would start off in the morning, I'd go for a 6-mile run. I'd have to do it in under 38 minutes. That's a 6.5 minute mile. So I ran it pretty fast. When I got done with that, and I would do 20 100-meter hill sprints up a hill, 100 meters, with a guy on my back over my shoulders. I'd run up there and I jog down, run up, jog down. And then I would take it over to my apartment where I had an Airdyne bike, and I would Airdyne on sprint for a minute and then go tread lightly for a minute and do that for a whole hour. And then I would do another, probably another 30, 100-yard wind sprints. And then I would get in a sauna, stretch, and that'd be my first workout. And then, I would do 3 during the day. So the second workout was my wrestling workout. And I trained really hard with the wrestling workout. I wrestled live for at least for 2.5 hours. And then my third workout was more strength training. It was plyometrics and some more conditioning. And so I would train about 10 hours a day every day, and I only took 1 day off a month, and that was it. So my training was filled with a lot of events.
When you were a young guy, because we didn't really get to explore this in the documentary, you're going to have an ego. You're a wrestling champion. And you're doing the things that young men do. You're dating girls. You're living the life. What was your ego like? What was your personality like as a younger man?
Well, let me tell you this. I didn't date as many girls as I should have. I didn't go to as many parties as I should have. And the reason is I sacrificed all that for something greater. And that was the Olympic gold medal. That was my dream since I was a kid. So I didn't do a lot of stuff growing up. I didn't go out with my friends. I didn't go to parties. I didn't, go to social events. I spent my time training, and that's how I was ever since I was in high school. Yeah. And so I didn't have much of a social life, and I didn't mind that. I didn't care about that. I did have a girlfriend. We would hang out at my house or her house, when I wasn't training. Didn't do a lot, not a lot growing up. So as far as ego, I didn't have an ego. I was very grounded, and I was very focused on one thing, and that was wrestling.
It's very unusual for a young man at your age at that point to be so disciplined and dedicated. When you met your dad in the documentary, it must have been to do with him because he was a tough guy, disciplined himself. Do you think he was the main reason for it, or were there other factors?
No, he was the main reason that the light bulb went off in my head. Before my dad died, I wasn't focused. I actually wasn't doing that well. In the documentary, they say I was a great athlete since when I was born. That's not true. I was probably the worst athlete in my family, and that wasn't bad because everybody in my family were good athletes. But I lost a lot when I was younger. I cried a lot. I was a real crybaby. My family doubted if I'd ever be good at sports. And when my dad died my freshman year in high school, he told me this the year before he died. He said, "You're going to be the one." And I didn't understand him, but he knew for some reason that I'd break out of this crybaby stage and end up being a great performer. And so I didn't understand what he meant. And when he passed away the next year, I thought, my dad said I'm going to be the one. I gotta start working hard now. So I was motivated for him because he's the one that told me, "You're going to be the one to pull us, the family, out and make the name famous." And I did, and my dad was right. But that's what enabled me to have the courage to go out there and train harder than anybody else.
That really hit me in the documentary because I lost my mother probably at a similar age to when you lost your father. And I had a very similar feeling of, I've got to do well for you now. I've got to prove you right. Yeah. And seeing you do that was really emotional. And you're an older man yourself now. You're probably older now than your dad was when he died, I would assume.
Same age right now.
Or around the... Wow. So I can only assume as I am, you may be sort of learning who he was from different eyes as you're like, oh, that's why you did this. And, you're understanding him a bit differently now. Have you ever... And I hope you don't mind me asking this. I do apologize if it's an intrusive question, but have you ever thought of why your dad had the alcohol thing? Because you mentioned it, but I wondered if now you thought about that. No,
you know what? I don't know why. I don't know how. Don't know what happened in his life to make him revert to alcohol. He did drink it all day, but for some strange reason, it didn't really affect him. He showed up at my sporting events. He showed up to work. He'd go to church every week, every Sunday. And actually, I think the reason why he kind of went to church is because we would go to the club afterward. He could go drink with his friends, And so we kind of got in this routine where my dad, made sure that we were first in his life, but that liquor was second. And he was going to, when we go to a baseball game and I'd play, we go to the bar afterward. My dad would have a few drinks and I would play video games. So it was always intertwined. The alcohol was always intertwined with the sports. So it was really crazy. But my dad, he was a functional alcoholic. He was able to exist, even drinking the alcohol. Now, don't get me wrong. When he would go to sleep, he would chug, 2 big glasses of rum, just chug them back to back, and he would pass out. And then he'd wake up in the morning. When he got up in the morning, he'd drink a whole glass of rum before he went to work. And then he would drink during lunch. Then he'd drink after work. And then he would drink at night after dinner, then so on. The whole pattern continued. So it was seeing that, we weren't abused as kids. So it wasn't so bad. But, I look at it now and I think I didn't talk much with my father. I didn't have a communicated relationship with him. And it's because he was always either working or sleeping, or he was watching our sports, which means I was playing while he was sitting there watching. So the only time we get to talk is in the car on the ride home. And that was it. And then my dad would, take his drink and go to sleep. So it was a really odd relationship, but I knew my dad loved me because he loved watching me compete.
Yeah, it really hit me how he was just he's such a man. He really comes across as an old school guy who was trying to protect you as much as he can and carry on. When you say functional, that takes strength. To be a functional alcoholic, it takes real strength to do that. And to lose a male role model like him, but then also to end up losing, your wrestling role model in Dave Schultz not long after, it hit me when I was watching that, like, wow, what this guy must have been feeling at that time when you joined Foxcatcher, which for those who don't know is a hugely famous wrestling side where all of the best were training under Dave Schultz, and he particularly took a shine to you. And then this crazy owner of the wrestling school takes a gun out and shoots him. I mean, what was that like for you going through that? It must have been insane, mate.
What's crazy is I would train at Foxcatcher probably 7 months a year because it was in Pennsylvania. It was right down the road from me, 3 or 4 hour drive. So I would go there and I'd bounce back and forth from my hometown to Philadelphia, PA, where Foxcatcher was. And I called Dave the day that he got killed. I called him right around the time he got shot. I left him a message on his answer machine, and I told him that I'm coming out the next day to train with him. And I go to practice that night after I made that call. I went to practice in Pittsburgh down at Duquesne University. It's a college in the city of Pittsburgh. And I wrestled, I trained, and afterward, I look up at the TV and I see on CNN, Dave Schultz shot and murdered. And I was like, what? Is that my Dave Schultz? And I turned up the volume and it was like, oh my God, John DuPont just killed Dave Schultz. I mean, what? This is my coach. And looking back, there are a lot of things we could have done to prevent that. I think that John was unraveling and we were trying to keep him at bay just until after the Olympics. And then everybody was going to quit afterward. It was one of those things where everybody needed the money that they were getting until we got to the Olympics. Yeah. And then we were gonna take a hike and leave Foxcatcher. But we didn't make it to that point because John DuPont shot and killed Dave Schultz before the Olympics. So it was hard for me because I didn't have an Olympic coach the last 6 months of my career. Dave was my Olympic coach, and but Dave taught me enough to know what I had to do from here on in, and I started training myself, and it worked because Dave gave me the strength, the knowledge, and the courage to do that, and I owe Dave so much to my career. I don't think I would have won the Olympic gold medal if it weren't for Dave Schultz.
Dave, being the size he was, and as you said, he threw you around despite being a smaller guy, and you were a smaller heavyweight. Yeah, that's a humbling experience right there.
Yeah, he's 165 pounds. Yeah, I was 215.
Damn. I mean, he obviously, being a smaller guy, would have taught you a lot of those tricks of the trade that as a smaller heavyweight, you could then employ against these monster dudes who you're coming up against, because sometimes the size difference was tough on you, right?
Yeah, that's what Dave would teach me. That's why I was able to beat these guys. I couldn't beat them initially, but when Dave started teaching me the techniques and everything that would help me out, I started beating those guys, the guys that were beating me. And I owe all that to Dave. And he would show me little Russian tie tricks and a modified Russian tie. And he'd teach me how to underhook a guy and, attack him from an underhook. Dave was really good at that stuff. And he was the best technician in the world. He actually learned 7 different languages so he could learn from other countries about technique from different countries, from Russia, from Iran, so he from Cuba. So he learned all these different languages so that he could universally understand wrestling.
Yeah, I mean, as a big fan of MMA, when you look at what the Dagestani wrestlers have brought to the table, and you can imagine this guy being the sponge that he was, just plucking from every corner of the globe. In terms of John DuPont, what was your first impressions of him? And were there any noticeable moments that you can remember when you thought, like, you're not right, and I got to keep my eye on you?
Well, it's funny, but it's not funny. Well, John was a little odd when I first met him. He was quiet. He wouldn't say anything for 5 minutes. Then he'd start blurting out, different words and sentences. He was always trying to impress everybody. He wanted to act like he knew wrestling. So he would tell you, hey, to be a champion, you have to work really hard, stay dedicated. He told you all the basic stuff, And
yeah.
So one time I was at his house, his mansion. There's a beautiful mansion. The wrestling facility was right next door to it. The farm, there are about 40 houses that all the wrestlers lived in these houses all over the farm on Foxcatcher. So I was at John DuPont's mansion, and John was dabbling with drugs at this particular time. He was doing a lot of cocaine. And what happened was we were in his trophy room, a friend of mine and me, and we just ordered pizza, and they were going to bring it to the trophy room once it got to the mansion. So we were waiting in the trophy room, and John DuPont comes down. He has all this white powder on his nose. And he's like, hey, Rob, come with me. And it's my friend that was next to me. So Rob goes with him. They go upstairs, comes back down. John DuPont has a gun in his hand. I was like, holy shit. Like, what am I going to do now? He has a loaded gun. He's holding it up in the air. And I'm like, oh, my God, I better get out of here. And he says, Kurt, you need to leave. I was like, oh, shit, do I leave Rob alone? Like, I didn't know what to do. I was kind of confused. And John DuPont said, Kurt, you have to leave right now. So he still had the white powder in his nose. He was sniffing cocaine. So he has his gun in his hand, and he goes down to the basement of his mansion. He finds this tunnel. It's from the Civil War. The DuPonts are the ones that made the gunpowder for the United States, for the North and the South to fight each other. Okay, that's where they got the name and where they got their money. So he goes downstairs, and there's a tunnel, and it's 4 feet high. So you have to bend over to get in it. And it goes about 600 yards to another home. So it was kind of like a safety thing during the war. And so John DuPont tells Rob to get in first. And Rob gets in, he's bent forward. So his butt's facing John. John gets in, and he has a loaded gun pointed right at Rob's ass. And he had to walk like that for 600 yards. Okay. And John was a little unstable. He's high on cocaine. He has a loaded gun in his hand, and they're walking bent over with a loaded gun pointed at Rob's ass. When Rob told me that, I was like, oh my God, we got to do something. And, but things started to die down. And then John started accusing me of being in his walls and accusing other people that they were in his walls. He just got really out of control. And it got to the point that Dave was like, listen, we have a few more months till the Olympics. Let's hunker down. Let's make it to that point, and then we'll all leave. But it didn't happen because John DuPont shortly after that killed Dave Schultz.
For you to recover from that and then go on and win the Olympic gold medal, but without the injuries, would have been impressive. So to do it with those physical problems you were battling at the time is insane. And just watching those matches back, and the editing on that documentary was superb. The drama, it really felt like such a fight. And when you've got this big Iranian dude and you're doing everything you can to just get that one little bit of advantage from... And the thing that really hit me is the fact that these guys who are sportsmen are grabbing you by the neck, knowing you've got a broken neck, and yanking it and trying to break it worse. And you're full of painkillers. I mean, can you kind of describe what that is like, going through that?
Oh, man. You know what? I honestly, I couldn't feel it because I was getting 15 shots of Novocaine all throughout my neck, 5 minutes before each one of my matches. So this dumbass that I'm wrestling, he's going for my neck because he knows it's broken. But every time he reaches for my neck, I drop to his legs and I take him down. So the whole plan, his game plan backfired on him, and it made it easier for me to beat him. It was fortunate for me, but unfortunate for him. But, he did try to hurt my neck. He definitely did. He probably did hurt it a little bit worse, which is probably why an hour after my match was over, I was dying. My neck was in excruciating pain.
Wow.
I mean, I literally thought that I was going to die. Okay, it hurt that badly. And I still had another match to go during the Olympic trials. I had to wrestle him again, and I did later on that day, the second match. To win the Olympic trials, 2 out of 3 matches. You have to win 2 out of 3 matches in the finals. So I ended up beating him, but man, he really tested my neck, definitely.
I felt speechless watching that. When you finally won that gold medal, just to really live that as a fan of you post that, to go back and realize, I think if we as wrestling fans had understood what you'd gone through, I think the feeling towards you, because they were a little bit indifferent when you first showed up, right?
Oh, yeah. They hated me.
Been a lot. Yeah, they would have. Yeah, indifferent would have been good compared to, they did hate you. But you lent into it. And that was a great thing. But going back to the winning of the gold medal, I watched that post interview when you've got the gold medal and you're so happy and you're talking about your dad and Schultz and these, I think it was your grandmother who you'd lost as well. And you said, if I die tonight, I'm the happiest man alive. And I just thought, wow, if any man can ever say that in any moment of their life, then they've done good. And I just wondered what it was like after that. Like, how did you soak it up, or was there any emptiness when you finally reached a goal? You're like, well, what do I do now? Or what was that moment like?
Yes, man. I listen, all I thought about when I was a kid growing up in high school, college, was the Olympic gold medal. I didn't think about my life afterward. I literally was focused on the gold medal, didn't care about anything else. And after I won the gold medal, I was scared to death. I was like, oh my God, what am I going to do now? Like, I knew I had a college degree. I could be a teacher because I had an education degree. And I thought, I don't want to be a teacher really. So I don't know what I'm going to do. Like, and I feel like I'm not done being an athlete. I felt like that I could contribute more somehow, some way. And the WWE approached me in 1996 after the Olympics, and Vince McMahon offered me a multi-million-dollar deal. It was an incredible deal, 10-year contract, multi-million-dollar deal. And I turned it down. And I'm not sure why. I know why, because back then, amateur wrestling was competing with pro wrestling. So when you'd ask a person on the street, hey, what do you do for a living? I wrestle. Oh, you're one of those wrestlers on TV. That's the first thing they would say. They wouldn't say, oh, you one of those amateur wrestlers trying for the Olympics. And so amateur wrestling kind of got bitter toward pro wrestling because they were taking the back seat, because anytime anybody talked about wrestling, people immediately thought pro wrestling. So I was always taught, stay away from pro wrestling. They're fake. You're real. You're the real deal. Stay away from it. And I did. And I did all the way up until 1996. And then when Vince McMahon offered me a contract, I went out and met with him, and I turned it down. But, a couple years later, I called him back because I seriously was not done being an athlete. My neck healed from the Olympics. I was like, you know what? I started watching Raw in 1998, and I fell in love with Stone Cold Steve Austin. And I thought, man, these guys are great athletes, and it's hilarious. I'd love to do something like this. So I called Vince McMahon, and I asked if that contract still stood, and he said, no, but you can come up and try out. And I figured, nothing in my life's ever come easily. This won't come easy either. So I went up and tried out. And after the first day, I picked up on everything so quickly, they offered me a contract. But it was only a $75,000 a year contract. And you have to remember in wrestling, pro wrestling, I have to pay not for my airfare. They pay for that. I have to pay for my hotel, my rental car, my food, my gas, and my tolls. $75,000 doing 300 shows a year is not going to cut it, okay? Especially if you have a family. So, I started out very humbly. Just like I did in amateur wrestling, which was no secret to me. I've always been started out in humble beginnings, and so I ended up signing with the WWE. And within 7 months, I was on TV, and within 10 months of my rookie year, I won the world championship. So I literally became a millionaire my first year wrestling, and with a $75,000 guarantee, I made $1 million more than that. Over the year. So I knew right then and there that I'm in the right place. And, this is gonna be my payoff for the Olympics, for everything I did to work so hard, because amateur wrestling, there's no money in it. Unfortunately, there's not. I mean, there is if you want to coach and you want to put on clinics and stuff like that. But for the most part, there's not a lot of money in it. So here was my payoff. And so I went to the WWE and I fell in love with that, just like I did amateur wrestling.
It felt, watching it back, that if the UFC had been what it is today, that you'd have been a UFC champion.
I don't know if he'd been champion, but I definitely would have joined the UFC. I would have signed with them. They contacted me in 1996, right after the Olympics as well. And back then, Dana White wasn't any part of it. I think the Gracies owned it. They offered me 10-fight deal for $150,000. That's $15,000 a fight. That didn't sound like a lot of money to me. Back then, it was for the UFC, because those guys were only getting $5,000, for a fight, or if they won the whole tournament, they got $50,000. That was it. So the contract wasn't so bad from the UFC standpoint back then. But what it is now today, I mean, these guys are getting $16-18 million a fight on pay-per-view now. Conor McGregor and Brock Lesnar and Ronda Rousey. So I passed on it, and I started wrestling in 1998 with WWE. And by 2000, UFC started becoming mainstream, and I was like, man, I'd love to do that. And then what happened was, literally a half a year later, I broke my neck again. And that was it. When I broke my neck again, I lost all my strength in my arms. I lost feeling in my hands. And it's till this day, I have no feeling in my two pinky fingers and my pointer fingers. So I have a lot of neck damage, and it caused me to lose a lot of strength in my upper body. So there was no way, even though I entertained it in 2006, I went to Dana White in 2006 and I said, hey, I'm ready. He's like, okay, this is what we're going to do. And he offered me a deal. He wanted me to be on the Real Fighter with Kimbo Slice. I don't know if you...
oh, wow. I remember that series,
Ultimate Fighter with Kimbo Slice. And I said, Dana, those guys don't get paid to be on that show. He said, don't worry, I'll pay you a substantial amount of money just to be on it. I'll take care of you. Yeah. But he said, listen, whether you win or not, I'll give you a 6-fight deal. I said, well, that sounds fair. So I was getting ready to do it, and I ended up signing with Impact Wrestling, TNA, a week prior. And I thought that I could do both, which was crazy. It was stupid, but I was, TNA was going to give me a part-time contract. So I figured I could train UFC as well. So I told Dana, I just signed with TNA. Can I do both? He said, no, you can't do both. I said, well, Dana, I have to respect this contract I have with TNA. I'll come back to you if my contract expires in a decent amount of time and I'm still at an age that you want me, I'll come back to you. So I had to pass on the UFC because they wouldn't allow me to do both. And I just signed with TNA. And I didn't want to tell TNA, listen, I'm not coming. I'm going to go with UFC because I just signed the deal. So
yeah, respect for that. And you mentioned Vince McMahon, obviously one of the biggest players in sports entertainment history. And you've known him from, the guy in the Attitude Era who, the Kiss My Ass Club and all the funny stuff he was doing, to all the way now where he is this global icon who's now doing deals with the UFC and Saudi Arabia. And how has your opinion and view of him changed in this 20-year period or whatever it is now?
You know what? From the first day I met him till today, even when we weren't talking, even when, things weren't going so well for me and I felt like he could have done more for me, I always looked at him as a father figure. And I think it's because, I lost Dave Schultz. I lost my dad. Anybody that controlled my life, like my dad controlled my sports when I was growing up. Dave controlled my wrestling. Vince controlled my pro wrestling. I looked up to him as a father figure, and I respected Vince. I loved him. And so I still feel that way to this day. He gave me an opportunity, and I took it. Now, did I deserve that opportunity? You're damn right I did. But he gave it to me, and I was very grateful for that. Yeah.
And your character, when you enter the WWE, it really jumped off of the page. This sort of innocence and sort of naivety mixed with arrogance and it was a genius character. And I kind of wondered, was that your idea or was the creative involved? Like, well, how did that come about?
You know what? I think they looked at my personality because I am a little bit, naive and a little bit kind of wander off. I have some ADD, I'm just a really odd person. But Brian George, the writer for WWE, and Vince McMahon, they saw me, the person I was, and they came up with this character that they wanted me to be a milk-drinking nerd that claimed that he had the three I's: intensity, integrity, intelligence. But I really didn't have it because I would cheat to win. And even though if someone cheated and beat me, I'd accuse them of it. But when I won and I cheated, it didn't matter. I didn't cheat. So it was a really, really cool, clever character that they came up with. And I was able to portray it perfectly because they took it from part of my personality. So it wasn't that hard for me to do. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. They never taught me how to cut a promo. They didn't have NXT back then. They had Dory Funkin' Dojo, where we had a camp where we'd go up 5 days a month up to WWE headquarters and train there. And very, very little promo skills. I literally maybe cut one promo and that was it. So I didn't really learn how to do that stuff. So here, Vince, my first night on the air, I'm making my debut in my hometown of Pittsburgh. And Vince says, listen, this is what you're going to say tonight. And I looked at him and I said, you're not going to write it down? You're not going to give me like a piece of paper? He said, no, I'm going to tell you it, and then you're going to say it. I was like, holy shit. So I'm waiting, and he says, all right, this is what you're going to say. And he starts blurting off these words, and I'm not listening because it's so long. Okay, I'm like, wow, this is like 3 minutes long, 4 minutes long, 5 minutes long. Holy shit. How much is he going to say? And he gets done talking. He goes, now can you go out and say that? And I said, Vince, I didn't hear a word you said. You're going to have to say it again. So he said, listen, I'm going to tell you one more time. You go out there, you say it, you swim, or if you don't say it, you don't do it right, you fail, you sink. So it's up to you. You want to survive, you go out there. It's totally up to you. So how you do this promo right now is how I'm going to treat you the rest of your career. And I was like, holy crap. So I went out there and cut the promo, and I got about 80% of it right. And Vince was like, this kid has something, because he remembered 80% of what I told him to say. And it was a 5-minute promo. So then he started, they literally, I started training for only 7 months before I went on WWE television. So I literally didn't know what I was doing in the ring. I didn't understand psychology yet. I knew how to do the moves and everything and the bumping and the selling, but I didn't know how to do the psychology, good guy versus bad guy. Good guy out wrestles the bad guy. The bad guy cuts down the good guy, gets heat on him, beats him up. Then the good guy makes a comeback. The bad guy tries to cheat to win. The good guy overcomes and wins the match. That's psychology. So while I'm on the job, I'm on TV, I'm learning this every week because every wrestler I'm wrestling is talking to me in the ring every single night. They're leading me through the match. So I did that for about a year. And because I was such a good follower, I became a good leader. I started leading the matches. So it really helped me. But learning on the job was tough because if you fail, you fail. They're going to fire you. But if you rise to the occasion, they're going to keep you and they're going to make you a huge superstar. So there was a lot of pressure on me.
And in terms of those guys who would lead the dance, who in particular did you feel like you learned the most out from?
They had me starting with like guys like Bob Holly, Steve Blackman, Val Venus, Eddie Guerrero, Chris Jericho. Yeah. So Chris Benoit, I was in really good hands. Like there were a lot of guys that were really teaching me the ropes of wrestling. And, then I was mixing in. They were mixing in. I wrestled The Rock within 2 months when I was on TV. Like they literally threw me in the main event like 2 months later. And so I was wrestling Undertaker, Rock, Triple H, Stone Cold Steve Austin. And that's when I really started learning how to wrestle in the main event. And those guys taught me a lot. Him, Kane as well. You name it, the guys that I wrestled, they were incredible. So I owe a lot of credit to those guys.
And you've just mentioned Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit, which is two, huge wrestlers in that time period who obviously had very sad ends to their lives. And from what I've seen on social media, some people kind of, shy away from talking about Chris Benoit and kind of act like he didn't really exist. And you've been very sort of open and not hid it. And I wondered sort of what the logic was behind that and how you feel about, the legacy that you have with these guys and sharing the ring. And also just back in that time period when those guys passed away, what that was like to experience.
Okay, well, Eddie and Chris, they became legends when they became world championships in WWE. I mean, they were the underdogs. Both of them are 5'8". Both of them weigh about 180, 190 pounds. Very undersized. And here they are the same year, at the same time, they win the world championships. And they're best friends as well. So it all came together for them. But I will tell you, the reason why I keep Chris Benoit's legacy going is because I have my best matches with him. If I pretend like he didn't exist, I pretend that I didn't exist. Because my greatest match is 2003 Royal Rumble against Chris Benoit for the WWE Championship. Iron Man match against Chris Benoit. We had WrestleMania 17 match against Chris Benoit. You name it. Backlash pay-per-view against Benoit. I have my best matches with Benoit. And if I don't recognize Chris Benoit, I'm not recognizing myself because they were literally my best matches. Now, I'm not going to lie to you. I had some great matches with Shawn Michaels and Brock Lesnar and Undertaker and Rock and Triple H and Stone Cold. But for me, Benoit was the guy because he reminded me of me. When he got in there, he was an intense technical master that knew everything about wrestling. And him and I meshed really well in the ring. And I was always excited to wrestle him, but I always knew it was going to be hard because he matched my intensity. He was able to step it up a level and stay with me. And no other wrestler has been able to do that.
Yeah, I've heard many stories about the lengths Benoit would go to teach these young cats in the wrestling locker room. If you disrespect people, he'll make you do 1,000 squats right there and then. Oh, yeah, this guy was a tough guy. And obviously, no one seen coming what would eventually transpire. But I was wondering if you felt like, I don't know, if there was moments where you noticed he was in a decline mentally prior to what happened.
Oh, man, you know what? Chris was unique. He was very quiet to begin with. He didn't say a lot. He spoke a lot with his wrestling, but they never asked him to do a lot of promos because he didn't really enjoy talking that much. And Chris was a very quiet individual, so it was really hard to read him. You didn't know if he was having a good day or a bad day because he was always Chris Benoit. I mean, most of the time he was emotionless. You didn't see any emotion in his face. He just had that poker face. And so you never thought how Chris Benoit, what he was thinking or what was going on in his mind. And I don't know if it had to do with brain damage or whatever it was. Nobody will ever know, to be honest with you. But it's a shame what happened. But I am really ultimately surprised that it was Chris Benoit that did that.
I hear you, and I appreciate you opening up about that. And, when it comes to technical wrestling, you are right there at the very top with people like Chris Benoit. And I actually think, looking back at it now, when you look at your legacy, I felt like you eclipsed Bret Hart. You had a bit more to your game than him. Your personality was more dynamic. Do you feel like you are that number one technical savage?
I'm up there. There's no doubt about it. I brought a lot of my amateur wrestling to the table. A lot of guys, they do the pro wrestling stuff, and I was able to intertwine both. And I think that's what made me special.
And you were high flying as well. You did that moonsault off the cage. It was crazy.
Yeah. Every once in a while I pull that out of my hat. But you know what? I thought I was, at the time I was wrestling, I thought I was the best wrestler in the world. Will I say, was I the greatest of all time? No, because to be the greatest of all time, I think you need to put in 20 consecutive years with one company. And I didn't do that. I put 6.5 with WWE, then 11 with TNA, and then another 2 with WWE. So I never was able to stay with one company for a 20-year period. So unfortunately, I can't put myself up there as one of the greatest of all time, although I think my technique does speak for itself.
And at the time, I think my favorite wrestler was Brock Lesnar. And you and him had such a great rivalry. And those jokey moments backstage where you were pushing and shoving each other. And, that rivalry, it was so fun to watch. But also there was a hint of reality there. You were both true wrestlers, true beasts. And what was it like locking up with him and having that time together?
Well, we had a connection right away. Because we were both amateur wrestlers. We both understood each other and what we accomplished throughout our lives. So we were literally traveling partners, even though we were having programs against each other. You're not supposed to drive with the person that you're having a program with, but we did it anyway. Sorry, Vince. But Brock was special because not only was he a great amateur wrestler, but this guy was the most powerful, quickest person I've ever met for his size, strongest, smartest, just overall best wrestler I've ever seen. When I tell you that Brock would have been good at whatever he wanted to do, I'll give you an example. He wrestled in college, won national title. Then he went to WWE, became WWE champion. Then he said, you know what, I'm going to go to pro football. And he would have made it in pro football if they told him they wanted him to go to NFL Europe for a year when NFL Europe existed. But he was the last cut for the Vikings. He was that close. And he never played a damn football in his life. That shows how incredible of an athlete he is. And not only that, then he wins the UFC title. And then he's like, you know what, I'll go back to WWE and win another world title. So it didn't matter where Brock went. He was going to succeed no matter what. It didn't matter what sport. You put him in basketball, you put him in football, you put him in, soccer. Doesn't matter. He's going to excel. He's going to be at the top. He's going to be the best at whatever he does. That's how good Brock Lesnar is.
I guess you must have been the least person surprised when he achieved the UFC heavyweight title.
No, I knew. You know what? I saw his first fight when he tapped out the Frank Mir, and I knew right then the way he manhandled Frank Mir. He just didn't have the knowledge. Frank got him with a leg lock and an ankle lock. A foot lock, and Brock didn't understand how he was able to do that, and Brock didn't really know how to defend that. Once he did, he was good to go. So I knew right then. I was like, wow, he manhandled Frank Mir. This guy's going to be a force to be reckoned with, and he was. I mean, he won the next fight he had. He won the UFC title, and then he defended it, I think, for 3 or 4 fights before he lost it.
Yeah, I felt like that added quite a lot of legitimacy to you guys, and proving that, a lot of these big time wrestlers actually have badass attributes and can actually get in there and do it. And in terms of Brock's match with you at WrestleMania, the somersault, moonsault, I think it was, that went wrong. You're in the ring with him. You're also badly injured prior to this. You had a broken neck before you went in there. He's now down. I mean, you two really went to hell and back together. What was that experience like? Were you worried about his health in the ring that time?
To be honest with you, I wasn't worried about his health at all until he hit that shooting star press. And when he landed on his head, I was like, oh, shit, he broke his neck too. I thought, he was knocked out. He got a concussion. He sprained his neck. He didn't injure it too badly, but the way he landed, he could have been paralyzed. Thank God he has a 22-inch neck, because that's what protected him. And when that happened, I froze. I was like, oh no, what do I do? I need to get my surgery tomorrow. So if I cover him and pin him, I'm going to have to hold a title another day. And I was like, I don't want to do that. So what do I do? And so I was in a situation where I didn't really know what to do. And the referee said, cover him. I'm like, I don't want to cover him. And he's like, cover him, because you got to make it look like it's going to be a false finish. So I covered him and I said, Brock, kick out, Brock, kick out, Brock, kick out. And he kicks out. I was like, oh, thank God. At least he's coherent. Jeez. He knows what's going on around him. So I said, Brock, we were both on our backs, and I looked over at him. I said, Brock, can you get up? He said, I think so. I said, do you think you'd give me an F5? He said, yeah, I think so. So I got up and I went to pick him up, and he cut me off, booed me in the gut, picked me up, gave me the F5 and the finish, and that was it. It shows what a badass Brock Lesnar is, because he literally could have just laid there and just, we could have did a double count and ended up with a draw. But Brock finished the match, and that's the kind of individual he is.
Obviously, with your injuries, with the neck issue that you had consistently, there was some of those times where I seen one clip of Brock himself smashing you into the turnbuckle, and your neck just sort of cranking to the side. It looks so painful. And look, you're putting your body in the hands of other people, and sometimes the mistakes are getting made. Have you ever yourself or seen other people have real problems with each other after the match because they didn't look after each other and there's an injury there? Or
you know what? There was one time when I got in a fight with Eddie Guerrero. And what happened was we were supposed to go out and get heat on Eddie. He had a tag match, and he got done with the tag match, and myself and the Honor Society, this was my group that I had at that particular time. I think it was Luther Reigns and Mark Jindrak. And we went out there, we got heat on Eddie, we beat him up. I didn't touch Eddie. I actually worked on Chavo Guerrero, and they beat up Eddie pretty badly. So we went back to the Gorilla, where you wait, when you leave the arena, you go back to the Gorilla where Vince McMahon is, and they're watching the show. And I went back there, and Eddie comes back, and he's flipping out. He's going crazy. What the F are you guys punching me and hitting me, and you're not taking care of me? And I said, Eddie, I didn't do it. He said, you did do it. I said, I didn't do it, Eddie. He pushed me. And I pushed him back, and he shoots a double leg on me. And I was like, oh, that was a mistake. So I sprawled and got him in a front face hold, and I started choking him out. And I got him choked out. And what's crazy is that should have never happened. I mean, it was partly my fault. I should have just taken the blame and said, Eddie, you're right. My guys were tough on you. I was tough on you because they were my boys. And instead, I showed a lot of pride, and I didn't want him to think that I was responsible for the guys that beat him up. But, Eddie, probably a half hour later, someone says, hey, why would you shoot a double leg on Kurt Angle? He said, because I'm fucking stupid. So
I love it.
It became a joke in the locker room. But yeah, that's the only time I saw that. But you know what? I'll tell you this. Brock broke my neck. When you talk about that turnbuckle spot where my neck went sideways, that was the first time I broke my neck was the Olympics. Second time, the first time in WWE was when Brock did that to me. And then 6 months later, after I healed, I came back. Brock hit me over the head with a chair, right overhead. Usually you swing sideways so it doesn't condense your neck. He went straight over as far as he could. And I broke 4 vertebrae, and I was out again. I had to have surgery again. It was horrible. So I had a horrible run for 2.5 years between 2003 and 2006, where I broke my neck 4 different occasions.
That really was something. And going back to Eddie, it kind of adds to the legend of Eddie Guerrero not being the biggest guy. I mean, you know, you're shooting a double leg on Kurt Angle. What's next? Swinging for Mike Tyson? Like, you know.
Right, exactly.
Like, it's literally the worst person to shoot a double leg on in the history of mankind. But okay, fair play to him, man. What a guy.
Well, he did wrestle in high school.
Yeah, I mean, fair play. The Latino heat wasn't just a gimmick. And your broken neck, it almost it becomes such a part of your life story because of the setbacks and constantly having to get over that. And obviously that led to you taking the painkillers, and the amount of painkillers that you were taking. You being the man you are, it kind of shows what level you needed to go to in order to get that relief from the level of pain. I think it was 65 Vicodin a day.
Yeah. I'm not proud of it.
It blew my mind.
Well, I'll tell you this. This is something that the doctors don't tell you. When I broke my neck the second time, the first time at WWE, I met a doctor and he introduced me to painkillers. He said, these things are the greatest things in the world. You're going to love them. So I started taking one every 4 to 6 hours. And after a while, your body builds a tolerance and one doesn't cut it. Then you take 2. Then 2 leads to 4. 4 leads to 8. Before I knew it, I was taking 65 extra straight Vicodin a day. This was within a 6-month period of time. And I mean, we're talking like almost enough to kill a horse. It was that bad. And what happened was my focus was not wrestling anymore. My focus was, where am I going to get the drug next? Because I became a druggie. I became an addict right away. 65 extra straight Vicodin a day. And the reason why I was taking them was not because of the pain anymore. It's because I was going through withdrawal. So, if I took 15 painkillers, a few hours later, they would wear off and I started having withdrawal again. I have to take more. So I was taking more all day, more and more, all day long, every single day. And what I realized is I couldn't. I was literally. There was a point in time where I wrestled Chris, or who was it? Brock Lesnar. We had a 1-hour Iron Man match on TV, and this is a sad point in my life. We were wrestling a 1-hour Iron Man match, and the night before we were at a house show, and I just got done wrestling, and my brother calls me and says, "Hey, listen, your sister died of a heroin overdose." And I was like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, she just died. You need to come back home and plan the funeral and get this moving." So, I was devastated, and I remember going back to my hotel room. And I was crushed. I was in such pain thinking about my sister, who was only 40 years old, that died. And I took 20 painkillers. I had them in my hand. And I threw them in my mouth and chewed them up and swallowed them. And I didn't wake up till 3 o'clock in the afternoon the next day. Okay, I'm supposed to have this 1-hour Iron Man match with Brock Lesnar. And I'm late already to getting there. And so the WWE's call me all day because they want to tell me I don't have to show up, that I could go home and plan the funeral for my sister, that it's okay, I don't have to do the match. And I remember saying something to my sister. I said, "Leanne, what do I do?" And she said, "Do it for me." That's all I heard. And I thought, all right, I'm going to do it for her. And you know what? It was that 1 hour with Brock was the best hour of my life because I didn't have to think about Leanne at that particular time. I was focused on the match because of my sister, because I was doing it for her. But for that 1 hour, I didn't have to think about what happened to her. And it was like my release. And I was like, man, I'd love to go 2 hours and not have to think about my sister, or 3 or 4. I'll go all day long. I'll go 24/7. Like that was my mentality, just to get away from from thinking about my sister. And the only thing that would get me there was the painkillers. So I was taking more and more and more. And all I was doing was trying to hide the pain physically and emotionally. And it got out of control. And I'll give you an example of what I was doing. I had 12 different doctors that were giving me 12 different scripts of medication. And I had to set up a calendar because you couldn't go to the same pharmacy. So you had to have 12 different doctors go to 12 different pharmacies. So I had all these different pharmacies on my calendar, and then it still wasn't enough. So I had to buy 500 of them illegally from Mexico. So I was buying 2,000 painkillers a month just to keep my addiction going.
How much do you think you were spending on that?
$7,000 a month.
Wow.
But remember, I was making a lot of money, so the money wasn't really an issue.
It's worth it at that point in your mind. Yeah. And the bit around your sister in the documentary was another real choking point for me, because I felt like I remember watching that Iron Man match, not having a clue what you were going through. So to know that now, understanding from a totally different angle as an adult myself who's been through hell myself, it was a really unbelievable moment. And you talked about how you tried so hard with your sister to help her in every way you could. And like many people do, you try everything, but no one can save them but them. And that is the saddest bit about it. You can only do what you can do. Yeah. And I just wondered, because it did seem to hurt you a lot, had you forgiven yourself for not being able to save her when obviously no one can?
Yeah, you know what? I have, and it was hard for me to do, but I look back and I realized I didn't have a choice. My sister kind of put me in that situation. She wasn't going to stop. She was lying to me. I continued to aid her drug addiction, even though I thought I was paying for her bills. So it was one of those things where I gave her one last warning, and I said, listen, you can't do this anymore. You got to stay clean and stop using my money for drugs. And she continued to, and it was really sad because she moved up here. I made her move up here to Pittsburgh, and she relapsed again. And that's when I decided not to talk to her anymore. I said, listen, I'm not going to talk to you till you get your life straight, because I've done too much for you and I've worked too hard and I've stressed out way too much. I don't want any part of this until you get better. And that's when she died. And that's why I felt so guilty. And it's hard on me till this day, but I know that I had to give her an ultimatum. I had to.
Yeah, I mean, you were given your own ultimatum later in life, and you chose the good path, thank God. But before you got there, we see footage of Mark Henry talking about how he was looking at you going, you can't be acting like this. You're Kurt Angle. You're a hero. You've got to set an example for people. And Stone Cold Steve Austin saying how you were on the phone to him, slurring your words. And now, obviously, as a sober man, what was it like seeing your friends go into detail like that and how hard it was for them?
Oh, you know what? I can't imagine how uncomfortable I made them. I didn't know I was slurring. I didn't know that when you're caught up in the drugs, you don't realize that you're supposed to be a role model and you're supposed to be, people are looking at you. I didn't realize people were really looking up to me and looking at me as a role model and, seeing my every move. And, when you're in the public eye, you can't do anything, you have to make sure you stay clean and stay out of trouble. And what I realized is I was so careless taking the pills and passing out in public. And I mean, I didn't know I was doing this stuff. When Stone Cold Steve Austin said that, I was like, whoa, I didn't know that. When Mark Henry said, yeah, you were supposed to be a role model, you don't do that stuff. I was like, man, he's right. And I started getting down on myself, like, man, you let a lot of people down, and you made Stone Cold Steve Austin feel uncomfortable because he called you and you were talking to him and you were slurring, and he doesn't want to be around that. And I put him in a position to feel uncomfortable because I wanted to take my drugs. And I think that, hearing those words from them really put a explanation point on the reason why I got sober.
There was the chat with Vince where he kind of put it on you that you need to get help. I wondered what that was like, but also if there was anyone else, any of the other wrestlers who may have said anything around that time.
You know what? I don't remember. Honestly, I'm sure some of them did, but I remember Vince because, I was there, I was meeting with him, and, he wanted me to get help. And I didn't want to help. And that's why I left the company. And I ended up going to TNA, Impact Wrestling. And what's crazy is I ended up doing what Vince wanted me to do. I quit my painkillers, but I was still taking this dose of morphine. My doctor put me on 2 doses of little tiny morphine pills. And that would keep me from getting withdrawal. So I wouldn't have to take all these painkillers. I just take these 2 tiny morphine pills twice a day. And, but then I started drinking alcohol excessively because everybody at TNA was drinking. So I was like, I'll drink too. So I started drinking and it became a habit, a bad habit. I would literally drink 12 cans of beer after my show at night and pass out. I did this for about a year or so. And after that, I started getting careless and reckless and out of control and irresponsible. I was literally going to the alcohol store, the beer store, grabbing the beer and drinking it while driving to the next town where I was going to have the next show. And what that got me was 4 DUIs in 5 years. I lost my reputation, everything I worked for. I was at the lowest point in my life. I called my wife from jail after my 4th DUI. And my wife said, I can't do this anymore. You either go to rehab or I'm taking the kids and I'm leaving. And I thought, wow, I don't want to lose my wife and my kids, not over drugs, not over alcohol. So I ended up going to rehab. You know what? I went to rehab. I didn't go to get better. I went to just so my wife wouldn't leave me. And when I got in there, I realized I had a disease. I mean, it was bad. They scare the hell out of you in there. They make you feel like when you get out, if you fuck up, you're a fuck up. You know, that's really the message they send you. Yeah. You know, you get out of rehab and you relapse, you're a screw up. You know, you're an addiction. You're an addict. You're an addict regardless whether you do it again or not. You know, I'm always gonna be an addict. I know that, but you can control that. And I was able to, you know, I've been able to stay clean for 12 years now, 13 years, actually.
It's so strange to me how people can reach such physical heights and achievements like you did, Olympic gold wrestler, and many other athletes out there, boxing world champions. And then at a point in their life, that addiction that made them great can also be their downfall, that addictive side of their personality where they just think they're Superman. And for me, there was 2 heroes in the documentary. One was you at the start, and one was your wife. What a woman. What a woman. I've got to say, good God, you picked the right one, mate, because she absolutely, you could see, she didn't want to say those things to you. She didn't want to put you under the pressure, but she had to do that to be the only one to hold the fire under you and go, if you don't do this, this is the consequences.
Well, you know what? I put her through a lot of pain. There are a lot of nights I would get all messed up and I wouldn't be there for her or the kids. And she dealt with it and the best way she could. And, you know, she would bring it up here and there. And, you know, I would just tell her, hey, don't worry. I'll be fine. I won't drink tonight. And I'd end up drinking, you know, it just, I was always lying to her. And that's what an addict does. He never tells the truth. He always lies. And my wife was so strong for me when I couldn't be strong for myself. And she kept the family together. And, you know, to this day, I owe her my life. I owe her everything because she was able to keep the family together while I was being a screw up. And that means more to me than anything. That shows her loyalty lies with me. And that means so much to me.
Yeah, there's a lot of people who think love is telling the other person everything they want to hear. But sometimes it's telling them what they need to hear, right? And the strength that she had was fantastic. So that was another emotional moment in the documentary there. And you mentioned being in jail. That must have been such a weird moment for someone who was revered by so many people as a hero, and now you're feeling like, you know, the lowest of the low.
Well,
what was it like in that moment?
I didn't feel like I was letting myself down. I felt like I was letting my fans down and my family down. And that's harder on me than being, you know, blaming myself or you know, I felt like, you know, I did them wrong. And because I'm not strong enough to stay clean, that I'm a weak individual. And that's what really opened my eyes is I'm not a weak person. Why am I doing this? And, when I was in rehab, I kept thinking, when I get out, I'm going to fuck up. I know I am. Like, I was literally, I was psyching myself out because, they're telling us in there, if you relapse, and you will. And it's like, okay, why are you telling me that I'm going to relapse? I'm trying to stay clean, They're like, well, when you relapse, and you will, get back on the wagon and keep going, So it's like, man, am I going to get through this? Because most addicts don't. Most addicts go back to it once they get out. Am I going to be one of the fuck-ups? And fortunately, because of that, me being aware of myself all the time, of me not wanting to be a fuck-up, that actually helps me stay clean. And talking about it with you and me right now, talking about it and what I went through and everything, telling our stories, helps me to stay clean. That's why I give speeches to individuals that I go to different companies and I give speeches about my addiction and my recovery. And that's something that really helps me with my recovery.
Yeah, I did wonder how, when you compare the things you've had to go through in life, how did winning a gold medal in the Olympics compare to trying to get sober again, like in terms of effort and challenges? And
one is mental and physical. That's the Olympics. The addiction part, it starts out physical, but then it's just completely mental. And so you have to remember.
What are the first physical signs like? How did the physical bit hit you at the start?
The withdrawal. Listen, when you go in rehab, and you're off the painkillers and off the morphine, off the alcohol, after a day, you start going through withdrawal. And you're sweating, you're going to the bathroom, you're pissing yourself, you're crapping yourself, you have a headache, you feel like you don't have any bones inside you, you're hot but you're cold. It's the worst feeling in the world. And it lasted me for about a week, which means I was taking a lot of shit. Because usually it only takes people 3 to 5 days. Took me a whole 7 days to get clean, to get through withdrawal. So it was a lot longer for me. And the thing is, what makes me want to stay clean today is knowing what that felt like. I don't want to ever go through that again. That was the worst feeling I've ever been through. Worse than my exhaust training, worse than anything I've ever done in my life. Going through withdrawal is the worst experience I've ever felt, and I don't ever want to feel it again.
Thank God you did overcome it, because we got to see you sort of come full circle and have your Hall of Fame moment, which is very well deserved, and dedicated to your wife. What was that like for that moment to just finally be able to go, like, I did it, and have that moment?
Yeah, you know what? It was a great feeling that WWE brought me back and inducted me in the Hall of Fame. And, for me, my wife, Giovanna, wasn't any part of my WWE career, but she was so supportive of me in my TNA career. And she understood that I had a life before her. And for her to take the back seat and say, hey, this moment's yours, go ahead and do this. I felt like when I was up there, I had to mention her and say, this is the most important person in my life, because she was there for me at my worst. And she's there for me at my best. And she's letting me do this, what I did in the past, that she was no part of. Getting inducted to the WWE Hall of Fame, my wife then never saw me wrestle in the WWE back in 2006, 2005. She did when I came back in 2017, but she wasn't a part of my life back then. But she allowed me to relive that.
You actually adopted another child. Yeah, I thought that was really interesting, because you don't see a lot of people do that when they've already got children. And I just wondered what made you want to do that together.
Well, my wife and I have 2 kids to another marriage, Cody and Kira. Mm-hmm. And my wife and I, we ended up having 3 girls right in a row. And we were going to plan on a 4th. And we decided, you know what? It's not a good decision. We're going to end up probably with another girl. And we want a boy, so we might as well adopt. So that's when we decided to adopt. And we ended up getting a kid. My wife fell in love with this kid. He was 12 years old, from Bulgaria, just a nobody, just a little skinny malnutrition kid. And she fell in love with him. And we had to go through the process. And I got to tell you, it's a long process. When you have DUIs and you're trying to adopt, Oh my God. Like the process took like 3 years. It was horrible. And a lot of tape to, break through. So we finally got there. So we got him when he was 15, and we got him right before the pandemic. And listen to this. If we wouldn't have got him before the pandemic, his birthday would have occurred. And after the pandemic, if we had to pick him up, he would have been 16, and you're not allowed to adopt a 16-year-old. They send him on the street. They give him $500 and say, you're on your own, go live your life. So if the borders got shut down after we picked him up, but if we would have picked him up after the pandemic, we would have never got him. And this poor kid would have never had a life. And, he's doing well right now. He's 19 years old. He's into weightlifting. He's going to be a firefighter. He joined the wrestling team last year. He did extremely well. Very proud of the kid. So, we do have a boy. His name's Joseph. His Bulgarian name was Ivan, but he wanted to change his name to Joseph because of his grandfather, my wife's dad. So he wanted to be named after him.
It's a very nice story, and I think it speaks volumes about the way your family is and how, again, coming back to the family unit, how important that's been for you guys. I was wondering, now that you aren't that superhuman guy and you are getting older, and how is that feeling for you as you're getting wiser? You're no longer that super athlete. Are you able to just accept that? Or, because some guys, they have that midlife crisis thing going on. Yeah. So how are you dealing with that?
Oh, I had it. I'd say for about a year after I retired, I didn't go out the way I wanted to. I was not in the best of shape when I went out. I was slowing down. The reason why I retired is because I noticed that I wasn't half the wrestler I was. And I didn't want fans to remember me as this broken down, aging wrestler. So that's why I retired. But, I didn't get to go out the way I wanted to. So that was really difficult on me. So I did go through a little bit of a crisis for about a year. And I finally got through it. And I thought, it just took me some time. I thought, you know what? You accomplished a lot. You should be proud of yourself. I'm at the point in my life where anything I do now is icing on top of the cake, because there's really nothing else I need to accomplish to prove to myself of what a fighter and a champion I was, especially overcoming my addiction. That's what I'm most proud of. And so, what I do now is I dabble in movies. I got a movie coming up in January. I just did a movie last March. I do some of that. I got a movie we're doing about my life story, which we're going to start filming probably next year. It should be a pretty cool thing. I'll be able to help out with it, be an advisor, which is kind of cool. So I'm looking forward to that. So I got a lot of stuff I'm doing, and being a father, which I never was. I mean, I literally was never there for my kids. My poor older kids, my 2 kids, they moved away, so they didn't live in the same state as I did. So I hardly ever saw them. But me being a father now and being able to spend time with them, and it's not too late, it feels really good. Because I never wanted to be that father that never took care of their kids or didn't care about them. And I'm able to do that now. And I'd be honest with you, I feel like an Uber service. I'm taking my kids to piano. I'm taking them to the violin. I'm taking them to soccer. I'm taking them to wrestling practice. My 7-year-old is a wrestler, a little girl. She's actually pretty good. A lot of them have learning disabilities. We take them to speech therapy, and it's just all day, all night. But I love it because I get to spend time with them. Every once in a while I'll do an appearance to show my appreciation for the fans. But other than that, I'm a father, and I absolutely love it. And I'm a husband, and I love that too.
I think you've been very lucky, Kurt, if you don't mind me saying, that you've been able to pull it back in time and to have that, because I think as men, we judge ourselves on, am I a good man, and am I doing the right thing by the people around me? And I'm glad you got to make it right.
Thank you. Yeah, you know what? You look
I have
like
one last
Triple
question
H
for
right
you.
Now. You look like Triple H right now.
I've heard that before. I've heard that before. Maybe give him a ring and get me into the center, because ironically, I'm friendly with Logan Paul. I'm good mates with Logan, so maybe we could sort that feud out, YouTuber feud. Actually, while we're on Logan, I don't know if you've seen him, but right now he's having one of the fastest rises, arguably, since you and Brock. And I wanted to know what you're making of the YouTuber turned wrestler.
You know what? He's another kid that has really, at first I was like, yeah, he's a YouTuber, he's just trying to get into fame. But he was producing, he's winning fights. And then he goes to the WWE and he shows his athleticism. And it's like, whoa, this kid has it. Why wasn't this kid, why did this kid start out with YouTube? Why didn't this kid excel, be a pro boxer when he was younger or a pro wrestler? Like, this kid has the ability to be all the above. And watching him, I'm literally impressed by his skills. And I'm really happy for him. He just won the U.S. title. I think that's a great accomplishment for only wrestling your 8th match. I will tell you this. I won the Intercontinental title wrestling my 9th match. So I know the feeling.
Wow.
But he's on that he's on that level with me and Brock. I mean, he really is. And I think if he continues on and he has more experience, because he's not quite experienced enough yet, I think if he gets more experience, he's going to be really, really good. And I think he'll end up being world champion.
Well, that's high praise indeed from the Olympic hero. And I mean, as you say, he has an amateur background in wrestling in his high school. And I think that does show in his athleticism. If you were to give him any advice, being that he is in that trajectory of similar to yourself, what would it be?
Try not to spread yourself too thin. I know he's got a bunch of shit going on, his prime drink and wrestling. I don't know if he's still fighting or not. I got the YouTube thing. I don't know if he's still doing that, but he seems to be all over the place. And that's really good as long as he has a great management team. But just, try to focus on one or two things and do the best you can at those one or two things. I think that's one thing I would say to Logan. If you love wrestling, focus on it. Make it your first love and make it first priority. And do what you got to do to become world champion.
I agree. I actually think he is as good as he is as a boxer. I think he's even better as a wrestler. And I dropped him a message and I said, these prime bottles, you got to get up on that turnbuckle and do the Stone Cold Steve Austin with the prime bottles. Man. When's that coming? But my last question for you, Kurt, and thanks again for your time, is how would you like to be remembered?
I would love to be remembered as a person that was respectful to others, that I didn't have an ego, that I was a very humble individual, that I was a great father, a great husband. I want to be remembered as one of the greatest of all time in amateur and pro wrestling. I think I've been able to accomplish that feat. So what's crazy though? I was told this last week, and it's kind of rings true. Is anybody going to remember me 100 years from now? I start thinking about those things, like what happens in 100 years? What's going to change, and what people will be remembered?
You absolutely were one of the greatest of all time, Kurt. Not a doubt in the minds of the people. I want to thank you for all of the hours of entertainment, for this interview. It's made my day. Honestly, I'm a huge fan, so thanks so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me on. Yeah. I had a lot of fun today, too, talking about all my shit in the
much
past.
Appreciated. It means the world, Kurt. Thanks a lot, and you take care. Love to the family. See you soon.
All right, take care, my friend. Bye-bye.